A Decembro rain drummed against the red tiles of Les Jardins d'Almadies residence, weaving a hypnotic melody through the Dakar night. Esperança Mukambi adjusted her security guard cap and pulled her navy blue uniform jacket tighter around her petite frame. Through the illuminated bay windows of the villas, she caught glimpses of gold and crystal chandelier sparkles, witnesses to a world that seemed as distant as the stars themselves. "Mum will be late again tonight," she whispered, thinking of Benedita, her 8-year-old daughter, sleeping peacefully in their small room in the Medina. Each night, Esperança walked these palm-lined paths bordered by royal palms and purple bougainvillea, protecting the golden dreams of Senegal's elite while nurturing her own hopes for a better future. The sharp beep of her walkie-talkie jolted her from her thoughts. 11:30 p.m. round complete, North Sector secured, she reported in a clear voice tinged with her Angolan accent, a heritage from Luanda that she had left 3 years earlier after her husband's death. That's when she heard the muffled voices coming from the underground parking garage. Her heart began beating faster. Maternal instinct, sharpened by life's trials, whispered that something was wrong. She silently descended the marble steps, her security shoes barely touching the ground. Between the white concrete columns supporting this cathedral of luxury, 3 hooded figures surrounded an elegant man in a dark suit. "Domingos Candala, son of Sebastian," one of the attackers whispered. "You're coming with us without making trouble." Esperança immediately recognized the architect she sometimes encountered during her rounds. Domingos Candala, 32 years old, heir to Senegal's most powerful commercial empire. Her hands trembled on her walkie-talkie. Calling the police would take too long. This man would die before her eyes if she did nothing. Fear knotted her stomach, but her legs moved on their own. "Help! Assault in the parking garage!" she screamed while triggering the emergency alarm. The shrill sirens tore through the quiet night of Les Jardins d'Almadies. The 3 men turned around, surprised. In the panic, one of them released Domingos, who staggered toward Esperança. Without thinking, she threw herself between him and his attackers, arms spread wide as if protecting her own child. "Leave him alone!" Her voice echoed through the parking garage with an authority she didn't know she possessed. The tallest man sneered. "You, the guard, mind your own business." "My business is protecting the residents," she replied, her eyes bright with determination. Security car headlights suddenly swept the parking garage. The attackers, panicked, fled through the service stairway, their footsteps echoing like distant thunder. Domingos slowly straightened up, brushing his Armani suit with a mechanical gesture. His dark eyes scrutinized this woman who had just risked her life for him. Under the pale neon lighting, he discovered a face with fine features, prominent cheekbones that betrayed her Bantu origins, and especially amber eyes that burned with an indomitable flame. Are you all right?" asked Esperança, still breathless from adrenaline. "Thanks to you, yes." His deep voice carried a perfect French accent, polished by years of European studies. "I'm Domingos Candala. I know who you are, sir. I'm Esperança Mukambi, night guard." The contrast between them was striking. Him, in his suit that probably cost the equivalent of 6 months of her salary. Her in work uniform, her hair disciplined under her regulation cap. Yet in this moment, face to face in this underground parking, they were nothing more than a man and woman, connected by a moment of pure humanity. "Esperança," he repeated softly, as if engraving this name in his memory. "Hope," in Portuguese. She nodded, surprised that he knew her name's meaning. "My father said I was his hope for a better world." Security agents arrived rushing in, radios crackling and flashlights in hand. In the commotion that followed, questions, reports, verifications, Esperança was about to discreetly resume her rounds when Domingos placed his hand on her arm. "Wait," he said. "What you did tonight, few people would have had that courage." "Anyone would have done the same," she replied, lowering her eyes, embarrassed by the intensity of his gaze. "No," he murmured, "not anyone." The echo of their voices died in the parking's restored silence. Esperança stepped back, conscious of the social distance separating them. Her uniform brutally reminded her of her place in this immutable hierarchy. "I must return to my work," she said, adjusting her cap. Their eyes met one last time before she disappeared into the shadows. Domingos knew at that instant that his life had just changed. The morning prayer call resonated through the Medina's narrow streets when Esperança gently pushed their small room's door. Benedita was still sleeping, curled up under the colorful cloth that served as their blanket, her brown curls spread across the worn pillow. At 8 years old, her daughter already had that precocious wisdom of children who grow up too fast. "Mama?" murmured Benedita, rubbing her eyes. "How was your night?" Esperança sat on the narrow bed's edge, tenderly stroking her daughter's hair. How could she explain to a child that she had saved the life of a man whose world was light years from theirs? "Fine, minha filha. Rest a little longer." But Benedita had already jumped from bed, her bare feet slapping on the cement floor. "Grandma Joaquina is making coffee. She says you had a special night." My Joaquina, 80 years old with an intuition that never failed her. In their tiny kitchen, the old woman slowly stirred coffee in a small pot, her tired but piercing eyes fixed on her granddaughter. "Sit down, Menina," she said in her hoarse voice marked by age and exile. "Your Angolan ancestors speak to me. Something changed last night." Esperança smiled despite herself, her grandmother and her mysterious connections with the beyond. "It's just that I helped someone, Avo. Nothing extraordinary." My Joaquina poured steaming coffee into 2 chipped small cups. "And this man, how did he look at you?" Red rose to Esperança's cheeks. "Avo, I knew it." The old woman nodded with satisfaction. 40 years I've been reading people's eyes, Menina. Love can't be hidden." After dropping Benedita at the neighborhood Quranic school, Esperança took the packed rapid transit toward Sandagar market. She needed normalcy, to rediscover the familiar colors and scents of this popular Dakar that had welcomed her 3 years earlier. The market was already buzzing with life under the morning sun. Women in bright boo-boos arranged their wax fabric stalls with hypnotic patterns, their melodious voices mixing with the cries of café tuba and bisap vendors. A blind griot, sitting in the shade of a century-old baobab, was playing legends of ancient kingdoms on his kora. "Esperança, my Angolan sister." Fatu, the vegetable vendor, welcomed her with a broad smile. "You look different today. Something good happening to you?" Before Esperança could answer, a man in suit and tie cut through the crowd, holding a bouquet of red roses. "Miss Esperança Mukambi." "Yes, delivery for you." He handed her the flowers and a small, elegant card. The chatter immediately stopped around her. In this neighborhood where a bouquet of roses cost the equivalent of a week's meals, all eyes converged on Esperança. Her hands trembled as she opened the card. "Thank you for your courage. With my eternal gratitude, DK." "Who's this DK?" whispered Fatu, eyes wide. But Esperança didn't have time to answer. A black Mercedes with tinted windows had stopped at the market's edge, standing out like a UFO among the carts and mopeds. A woman got out, elegant and icy, her French designer dress contrasting violently with the place's authenticity. Victoria Mendez advanced toward them with her haughty gait, her stiletto heels clicking on the broken asphalt. At 26, daughter of the economy minister, she embodied that Senegalese bourgeoisie that despised everything that didn't shine with its artificial brilliance. "Are you Esperança Mukambi?" Her cutting voice made the curious step back. "Yes, madam." Vittoria snatched the bouquet from Esperança's hands with a nasty smile. "I see my fiancé took pity on you after your little performance last night." Silence fell around them. Even the griots stopped playing. "Your fiancé?" stammered Esperança. "Domingos Candala. We're marrying in 3 months." Vittoria examined the roses as if they were soiled. "Listen to me carefully, little guard. Domingos is kind to all his employees. Don't misinterpret his intentions." Esperança felt humiliation burn her cheeks. Around her, gazes oscillated between compassion and embarrassment. Fatou placed a protective hand on her shoulder. I never thought, began Esperança. Of course not. Vittoria headed toward a metal trash can and carelessly threw the bouquet in. A woman of your condition cannot understand the world my fiancé moves in. The situation's injustice revolted Esperança. This woman treated her like an object, as if her poverty prevented her from having worthy feelings. Madam, she said, proudly raising her head, condition doesn't determine a person's worth. Vittoria burst into crystalline and cruel laughter. How touching. Keep your beautiful phrases for your market friends, little one, and especially, she leaned toward Esperança, her luxury perfume assaulting the incense-scented air. Especially, stay away from Domingos. She got back into her Mercedes, which disappeared in a cloud of dust, leaving behind a heavy silence. Esperança looked at the crushed roses in the trash, their red petals mixed with garbage, beauty soiled by gratuitous meanness. Don't listen to that witch, murmured Fatou, hugging Esperança. She's afraid, that's all. Women like her sense when a real rival arrives. Later, alone in her room, Esperança thought about Vittoria's words. Fiancé. Domingos wore no ring, but in these circles, marriages were often decided by families. On the other side of town, in the sumptuous living room of the Candala villa in Almadias, Vittoria was reporting her mourning to Catarina Candala, Domingos's mother. This 55-year-old woman, widowed for 10 years, had built her life around her only son's social ascension. You did well, approved Catarina, sipping her mint tea in a Limoges porcelain cup. Those people only understand force. This guard is dangerous, Mrs. Candala. I saw how Domingos spoke about her this morning. He even said she was exceptional. Catarina's face hardened. Exceptional? An Angolan guard? We must act before she gets ideas, insisted Vittoria. In her delayed adolescent room, despite her 26 years, surrounded by photos of European princess weddings and fashion magazines, Vittoria contemplated her reflection in the mirror. Beautiful, rich, educated. Why did this uniformed woman put her in such a rage? Vittoria smiled coldly while throwing the flowers in the trash. A simple guard cannot understand who she's dealing with, she murmured. 3 days after the market humiliation, Esperança rummaged through her late husband's old trunk, looking for identity papers to renew her residence permit. At the bottom, under yellowed photos of Luanda, her fingers touched a sealed envelope she had never noticed. What's this? She murmured, breaking the red wax seal. The documents were in Portuguese and French. Her heart stopped reading the first. Birth certificate, Esperança Chimboto, daughter of Antonio Chimboto, born in Benguela, Angola. Chimboto, not Mukambi. Her hands trembled, discovering the following ones. Property certificates, mining shares, will, a colossal fortune in Antonio Chimboto's name, with her as sole heir. My Joaquina, she cried, her voice broken. Her grandmother arrived, a worried look in her tired eyes. Seeing the scattered papers, her face closed up. I knew this day would come, sighed the old woman. You knew? Esperança stood up, staggering. My father didn't die in the accident. Your father, Antonio, was Angola's richest man. His brother Mario wanted to steal everything. We fled when you were 3 years old. The revelation struck Esperança like a punch. Her whole life was a lie. She who fought every day to survive was actually heir to a fortune. Why didn't you tell me anything? Her tears flowed freely. To protect you, Menina. Mario is still looking for you. That night, overwhelmed, Esperança wandered through the residence gardens during her break. The tropical air was saturated with frangipani perfume and cricket songs. She stopped under the century-old baobab, its roots plunging deep into African soil, as she would have liked to anchor her own shaken identity. Esperança? She turned around. Domingos approached in the half-light, his suit exchanged for simple jeans and a white shirt. In this intimate setting, away from social conventions, he seemed different, more accessible. Mr. Candala, I didn't know you were there. Call me Domingos. He stopped a few steps from her. "You're crying?" She quickly wiped her cheeks. "It's nothing. For 3 days I've been thinking about you," he admitted softly. "About your courage, the way you saved me without expecting anything in return. Anyone would have done the same." "No!" He took a step toward her. "You're different, Esperança. There's something in you, a nobility that many don't have." His words touched her heart. "Nobility? I'm just an Angolan guard, no matter who you were before," he said, looking intensely into her tear-bright eyes. "What matters is who you are." They now stood face to face under the baobab branches. The African moon bathed their faces in silver light. Esperança felt his hand brush hers, an electrifying contact that made her shiver. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of my feelings for you, of this difference between our worlds." Domingos brought his free hand toward her face, caressing her cheek with his fingertips. "Worlds only exist in our heads. Here, now, we're just a man and woman." Time seemed suspended. Their breaths mingled in the perfumed night. Esperança closed her eyes, surrendering to this tenderness she hadn't known since her husband's death. "Esperança," he murmured, "you are my hope." Their foreheads touched, their hands intertwined. In this silent communion, they shared their vulnerabilities, their secret dreams of authentic love. "I must go," she finally said, reluctantly pulling away. "Wait." He took a small phone from his pocket. "Take it, so I can talk to you." She hesitated, then accepted the device. Their fingers brushed one last time before she walked away toward the buildings, heart pounding. The next morning, in her Almadies villa, Catarina Candala was receiving Mr. Diallo, Dakar's renowned private detective. "I did my research on this Esperança Mukambi," the man said, opening his file. "It's more complex than expected." "How so?" The detective handed Catarina a yellowed photo showing an elegant man in front of a diamond mine. "Your son has fallen in love with Angola's most sought-after heiress." The phone Domingos had given Esperança vibrated in her uniform pocket. During her break, sitting on a garden bench, she answered nervously. "Esperança? It's me." Domingos's warm voice immediately comforted her. "Domingos." She looked around, making sure she was alone. "I must tell you something about who I really am. You don't have to justify anything." "Yes." She took a deep breath. "My real name is Esperança Chimboto. My father owns diamond mines in Angola." The silence that followed chilled her blood. Would he reject her, thinking she had lied to him? "Owns or owned?" he finally asked. I don't know. Grandma Joaquina hides things. Then let's discover them together." Those 3 simple words melted her last resistances. Despite the revelations, the obstacles, he stayed by her side. The next evening, my Joaquina sat on their small balcony, fingering her ebony wood rosary. Esperança joined her, Benedita asleep in her arms. "Avó, I want the whole truth." The old woman sighed long, her eyes lost toward the horizon where the sun set over Dakar. "Your father, Antonio, isn't dead, Menina." The shock made Esperança tremble. "What?" "Mario, his brother, had him imprisoned in his own house in Benguela. For 20 years he's been stealing his fortune, claiming Antonio is crazy." 20 years! Tears of rage flowed down her cheeks. "You knew this and said nothing?" "I protected my family." Joaquina's voice broke. "Mario had men everywhere. We would all have been killed." Benedita stirred in her arms, awakened by the raised voices. "Mom, why are you crying?" "It's nothing, minha filha." Esperança wiped her tears, but her 8-year-old daughter looked at her with that precocious gravity of children growing up in adversity. "It's because of grandfather, right? The one in the photos." Esperança's eyes widened. "You knew?" "Grandma Joaquina tells me stories about him at night. She says that one day we'll go save him." This childish wisdom moved Esperança. Even Benedita understood family stakes better than she did. In the following days, news of Esperança's identity spread through the Medina like wildfire. Contrary to what she feared, her neighbors supported her. "You're one of us now," declared Fatu at the market. "Rich or poor, you remain our sister." Amadou, the neighborhood mechanic, nodded. This inheritance story changes nothing. You helped us when our son was sick. We don't forget. This community solidarity warmed Esperança's heart. Authentic Africa, that of true human bonds, stood against the Africa of appearances. But the noose was tightening elsewhere. Vitória Mendes had mobilized all her political networks. In her father's cushioned office at the ministry, she presented her plan. This Esperança Mukambi only has a temporary visa, she explained to the minister. Her papers expire in 48 hours. So, Minister Mendes, a corpulent man used to small arrangements, sipped his whiskey. So we refuse renewal. Reason, threat to public order. What are you basing this on? The troubles at Sandaga Market. Unauthorized gathering around this woman. Vitória lied with the ease of privileged people used to manipulating laws. It's a bit weak. Dad, Vitória placed her manicured hand on the mahogany desk. This woman threatens my marriage to Domingos Kandala. You know what this alliance represents for our business? The minister nodded. The Kandalas controlled imports, the Mendes exports. Together, they formed a lucrative monopoly. Very well. I'll sign the expulsion order tomorrow. Meanwhile, in a Medina cyber cafe, Esperança discovered Angolan newspaper articles mentioning her father on the internet. Antonio Chimboto, mining magnate, disappeared since 1994. Mario Chimboto manages his sick brother's empire. Look at this, murmured Domingos, who had joined her. He pointed to a recent photo, Mario Chimboto inaugurating a new mine, looking prosperous and satisfied. He stole my whole life, whispered Esperança, voice strangled by emotion. Domingos took her hand in his, ignoring curious looks from other customers. We'll get it back. We? I won't abandon you, Esperança, whatever it costs. No. This declaration, made in the simplicity of a popular cyber cafe, sealed their union more surely than any oath in a cathedral. That same evening in her Almadi's room, Vitória hung up her phone after confirming final details with immigration services. She contemplated her wedding photo with Domingos, already framed on her dresser. In 48 hours, this Angolan guard would be nothing more than an unpleasant memory. Vitória hung up the phone with a venomous smile. In 48 hours, this guard will be expelled from Senegal. The Kandala villa sparkled with 1,000 lights. Chinese lanterns and light strings transformed the gardens into a fairy tale setting for Domingos and Vitória's official engagement. Elite Dakar had responded in full, ministers, ambassadors, great merchants, all dressed in their finest traditional or Western attire. On the main terrace, a kora orchestra accompanied muted conversations. Women in gold-embroidered bubu mingled with those in Parisian designer dresses, creating a colorful mix of modern Africa. Domingos, magnificent in his traditional white Senegalese suit, shook hands with a forced smile. His gaze constantly swept the surroundings, seeking a presence that wouldn't come. Esperança was working that night, invisible in the shadows, watching over this party that celebrated the end of their dreams. My son! Catarina Kandala approached, radiant in her large purple bubu. Everything is perfect. Vitória is magnificent. Indeed, the fiancée glowed in a traditional red and gold Wolof dress, her jewelry sparkling under the spotlights. She embodied modern African beauty, educated and refined. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies clapped his hands. We will now proceed with the ring exchange. Domingos felt his throat tighten. In a few minutes, he would be officially engaged to a woman he respected but didn't love, while the one who made his heart beat watched this spectacle from backstage. Suddenly, a movement caught his attention. Esperança emerged from the shadows, pushing a refreshment cart. She wore her impeccable uniform, her hair pulled back under her cap, perfect embodiment of social invisibility. Their eyes met for a split second. In her amber eyes, he read infinite sadness mixed with unshakable dignity. Domingos? Vitória extended her gloved hand. We must go. He followed her mechanically toward the stage erected at the garden's center. Applause and ululations resonated when the couple appeared under the spotlights. "My dear guests," began Vittoria in a clear voice, "tonight marks the union of our two families." During her speech, her eyes sought Esperança in the audience. She spotted her near the buffet, discreet as a shadow. "But above all, I want to thank those who serve us so faithfully." Vittoria smiled with false benevolence. "Our devoted employees who make our evenings perfect." She pointed at Esperança. "Come, my dear, don't be ashamed." All eyes converged on the young woman who froze, cart in hand. Uncomfortable silence fell over the assembly. "Come closer," insisted Vittoria. "Show yourself." Esperança advanced slowly, head high despite the humiliation. Each step resonated in the tense silence. "There," declared Vittoria when she was at the stage's foot, "a perfect example of devotion. This charming Angolan guard even saved my fiancé a few days ago." Polite and condescending applause. Esperança remained motionless, straight as an arrow. "But sometimes," continued Vittoria, her voice hardening, "certain people misunderstand their place. They forget that between us and them, there's a world of difference." Unease grew in the audience. Several guests exchanged questioning looks. "She's just a guard," finally dropped Vittoria with icy contempt. "May she never forget it." The silence that followed was deafening. Esperança took the blow without flinching, but her eyes shone with contained tears. In this second of supreme humiliation, something magnificent happened. Instead of collapsing, she straightened even more proudly. "You're right, madam," she said in a clear voice that carried throughout the garden. "I'm just a guard who protects what has value." Apparently, we don't have the same definition of that word. Admiring murmurs in the audience. Several women nodded, touched by this dignity facing injustice. "Esperança!" Domingos suddenly descended from the stage. "Domingos, come back up immediately!" hissed Caterina. But he was already near Esperança. In front of 300 stunned guests, he took her hands in his. "Forgive me," he said loud enough for all to hear. "I should have had your courage from the beginning." He turned to the assembly, Esperança at his side. "My dear friends, I cannot marry Vittoria." His voice resonated clearly. "Because I'm in love with this extraordinary woman." Explosion of cries, outraged exclamations. Vittoria became livid. Caterina put her hand to her heart. But in the crowd, several voices rose. "Bravo! He's got guts. Love above all. I choose true love rather than false conventions," declared Domingos. Vittoria descended from the stage, furious. "You dishonor our families." "No, I honor my feelings." The scandal was complete. Guests dispersed while loudly commenting on this unexpected turn. Vittoria left the party with a click of heels, followed by her scarlet-faced father with rage. An hour later, calm had returned to the deserted gardens. Domingos and Esperança found themselves alone under the century-old baobab, where everything had begun between them. "You sacrificed everything," she murmured, still moved. "I gained everything." He gently caressed her face. "You." Under the African stars, in the frangipani perfume, they finally kissed. A tender and passionate kiss that sealed their love despite all obstacles. "What will we do now?" she whispered against his lips. Hand in hand, they looked at the horizon. "It's time to return to Angola to free my father," declared Esperança with new determination. The plane flew over the Angolan coast at sunset. Esperança, hand in Domingos's, looked through the porthole at her native land she hadn't seen for 20 years. Luanda sparkled at the Atlantic's edge, a striking mix of modernity and tradition, new skyscrapers and colorful slums. "Are you ready?" murmured Domingos, squeezing her fingers. She nodded, Benedita asleep against her shoulder. Mãe Joaquina, seated across the aisle, silently prayed her ebony rosary. 3 weeks had passed since the engagement scandal. Domingos had left everything, his architecture firm, his fortune, his privileged heir's life, to accompany her in this quest for truth. The Benguela villa stood atop a hill, majestic but decrepit. 20 years of neglect had damaged this colonial residence that once sheltered Esperança's childhood laughter. "Papa," she whispered, pushing the first-floor bedroom door. The man sitting near the window slowly turned his head. White hair, face hollowed by trials, but the same amber eyes as his daughter. Esperança. His voice broke. Minha filha. She ran to throw herself into his arms. 20 years of separation were erased in this infinite embrace. Antonio Chimboto, once respected businessman, wept against his found daughter's shoulder. "I searched for you everywhere," he sobbed. "Mario told me you were dead. We're here now, papai, to free you." Revelations followed. Mario, consumed by jealousy, had orchestrated their disappearance by corrupting doctors and officials. He had Antonio declared mentally incompetent, seizing his mining empire. "The evidence is in the safe," murmured Antonio, behind Mama's painting. Documents, recordings, testimonies, everything was there to confound the greedy brother. Domingos, with his international legal contacts, organized the legal offensive. Mario Chimboto's arrest made headlines in Angolan newspapers. The man who had enriched himself at his brother's expense was led away in handcuffs, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. "Justice is finally served," murmured my Joaquina, watching the television images. 6 months later, back in Dakar, Esperança inaugurated the Fundação Esperança, a foundation helping African women in difficulty. The building, designed by Domingos, harmoniously mixed traditional architecture and functional modernity. "Mom, you're magnificent," exclaimed Benedita, adjusting her mother's large golden boo-boo. Esperança was no longer the discreet guard of before. Recovered heiress, she radiated with new confidence while keeping her natural simplicity. Her fortune she had put at the service of the disinherited, creating training centers, microcredits, dispensaries throughout West Africa. "You changed the world around you," Domingos told her that evening, admiring his wife. They had married intimately, according to Angolan and Senegalese traditions. "We changed it together." Domingos had found his true vocation designing innovative social housing. The luxury architect had become a builder of hope. One afternoon, leaving her foundation, Esperança noticed a familiar silhouette sitting on a park bench. Victoria Mendes, thin, wrinkled clothes, no longer resembled the haughty woman of before. The engagement scandal had caused her family's downfall. Her father, involved in corruption affairs, had been removed from his functions. Their fortune had evaporated in trials and seizures. "Victoria," Esperança approached gently. The former rival raised eyes reddened by tears. "Esperança, I don't deserve your compassion. We all deserve a second chance. I lost everything. My fortune, my reputation, my friends. I now understand what you lived through." Esperança sat beside her. "Real life isn't found in what we own, but in what we give. Would you offer me a job? In your foundation?" "Of course. We need people who know both sides of life." This gesture of reconciliation marked Vitoria's complete transformation, who became one of the foundation's most devoted volunteers. Even Catarina Candala had finally accepted Esperança. "I was wrong," she admitted one day. "You made my son better." 1 year to the day after their meeting in the Jardin d'Almadi parking garage, Esperança and Domingos walked on Yoff Beach at sunset. Benedita built sandcastles. Antonio, finally free and serene, told his adventures to my Joaquina. "Who would have thought that a simple guard would change so many lives?" joked Domingos. Esperança smiled, looking at her recomposed family. Her foundation helping hundreds of women, and this Africa she helped transform. "True nobility isn't measured by what we possess, but by what we give," she said, squeezing her husband's hand. "A guard can become queen, not through her riches, but through her heart's greatness and her African resilience's strength." This story reminds us that a person's true value never lies in their social status or wealth, but in their heart's nobility and character's strength. Esperança teaches us that even in the deepest humiliation, we can choose to keep our dignity and transform our pain into strength to help others. Authentic love breaks all social barriers when it meets the courage to defy conventions. If this story touched you, don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel, leave a like to support our work, activate the little bell to not miss any of our new inspiring stories, and especially tell us in the comments from which country or city you're watching us, because we love knowing where our faithful listeners come from across the Francophone world and beyond.